All right, okay. So I am now recording this and I am now showing the screen. Can you see the screen?
Yeah.
Fabulous. Okay. Thanks very much for your time, everyone. The reason I am sharing this information with you is to revisit previous conversations where a few months ago, probably actually last academic year, I've shared with Alsh the fact that I'm going to be doing the NPQ-EL, which is the National Professional Qualification for Executive Leadership. And as part of that, I was going to be doing a project about remote educational learning, and I needed some partners. And a few of you then kind of tentatively agreed to be a part of it. And I just wanted to share and deliver some goods. And through that, hopefully have some more people who are interested in just having ready-made solutions for effective remote education in all sorts of sectors of special ed. So this is an update of what I've done so far with the view of sharing a toolkit with those of you who are willing to do a little bit of work, which shouldn't really add any work at all to what you're doing already, but hopefully add some benefits. So here comes. As you know, our vision for the school is to be research-led. We have got our own research function within the school, and all of that is to make sure that whatever we decide to do is based on really well thought through, rather than just a kind of knee-jerk reaction to the best way of teaching and supporting children with complex needs. And this particular project is aimed at designing a toolkit which is informed by research as well as action research and practice on remote education for special schools, including training and support that would mean that we would be able to take the concept of remote education well beyond the pandemic. So if you think about it as something that was born from the crisis, I think it could become a solution for example, school refusers, children who for whatever reason for prolonged periods of time cannot attend on-site provision. And I'm hoping, of course, that whilst my focus has been on SEND, it's transferable to mainstream settings which struggle equally at times with school refusers or with students who need to be learning remotely for very innocent and temporary reasons. So I've done the research review of the kind of global perspective on the remote learning and altogether on, I guess, focus on autism as the predominant need that was of interest to us. And some of those are on the screen, and it's interesting just how much of spanner in the works the remote learning or distance learning has brought to our profession. And I'm sure you'll agree that all of the conversations we've been having last year about the trade union stance and about our own lack of readiness in terms of infrastructure, families' readiness in terms of infrastructure or knowledge, and our kind of, I guess, technical abilities of the many staff who otherwise are experts in the classroom with hands-on education, but when put in front of a screen have found themselves a little bit insecure. So we've looked at the potential and the barriers and the need, and arrived at quite a few facts that I think will be interesting and will resonate, looking at those, I guess, characteristics that we've been dealing with over the past few months. We definitely know that this is true, that there are considerable differences in the levels of pupil engagement in remote learning, and that the issue of the socioeconomic disadvantage as well as special needs has been very prominent in the discussions. And I think that has only spurred us to actually try to do more in order to close the gap. And I think that there is now a need to really look at it, as I said, as a long-term plan. We've looked at research specifically about autism and remote education. And why? Because, of course, very often when we talk about the barriers to remote access, it's to do with communication and interactions. Because of special educational needs, communication is more effective when it's face-to-face. Interactions are essential in order to keep a student on task. And it was important to note that we had 3 in every 5 teachers report that vulnerable pupils are less engaged than their classmates. That view was also shared by senior leaders, and vast majority of teachers felt that there was lack of pupil engagement. that was the main contributing factor for those who were not attending. Interesting impact on of the pandemic and the remote learning on families of children with autism is that 1 in 5 families had to reduce work due to caring responsibilities, and 7 in 10 parents say that the autistic child has had difficulty understanding or completing schoolwork, and around half said that their academic progress was suffering. And this is latest research by National Autistic Society that is countrywide rather than just local. So therefore the issues that we are reporting here are important for us to note. 7 in 10 parents, you know, that's quite a high statistic, isn't it? We've conducted an online survey, which we've worked on between Christmas and New Year period, and we've reached 100 teachers from 13 different countries representing 4 continents. So that's another perspective of that kind of global special educational community and remote learning. And we've collected both quantitative and qualitative data on the current educational practice that is remote. And we've looked at the infrastructure and available devices, activities and the support, and the engagement, which is really of greatest interest to me here. And we've drawn some conclusions and suggestions for future practice. So if you look at the screen now, this question was about asking participants to select all remote learning activities that you had implemented during the COVID-19 pandemic. And all of those that were selected obviously were representing, you know, just how many people have selected those. And the findings are that live teaching is amongst most frequently delivered activities, and vast majority of people use Zoom, Teams or similar platforms for doing that. That group interactions and activities are used by just under 40% of teaching staff, whether it's an online chat, collaborative documents, online quizzes. About 30% of teaching staff continue to use PowerPoint presentations to go through individually, both prior and after the session. And reading and completing worksheets individually is an activity that has been offered by about half of teaching teams. And then the most important bit was, and so what? So how do we improve engagement with remote learning? So we've classed all of the activities that were reported to us to be most engaging and least engaging. And that really triggers, I think, the need for us as educators and as leaders of special schools to really rethink, redesign and re-engage with remote learning based on the evidence that is ahead of us. And fundamentally and shrewdly, and I know that there are of course more nuanced aspects of it, but deliver more of what is most engaging and deliver less of what has been proven to be least engaging for students with special needs and autism. And I wish to stress that that was for students of all ages. So we've looked at the population of 2 to 19. Obviously there is also post-19 perspective, but we didn't take that data into account. So what? So really looking at effective remote teaching, we need to make sure that we have got that active engagement, but we do need to use different forms of dialogue assessment and activities of what works, what doesn't. And whilst that doesn't sound like anything groundbreaking, I think we are better at that when we are in the classroom. And I think the remote education provision is still so new to us that probably we are not nearly as personalized or diversified as we are when we've got children in the classroom. This project has got several stages, and the first stage, which I've summarized, was the kind of literature review, looking at what works, launching that educational survey, then really looking at kind of what works around the world in special schools. The next phase really is offering to share that information, which I'm doing partially, but obviously just as a snapshot today, but not just as sharing of PowerPoint, but rather sharing of offer of support, practical support. We have got the capacity as a school to take some of the most innovative technological approaches that have been proven to work, not just in our school, but globally, and through our Head of Autism Research and Development, who is coincidentally also almost a PhD. She's just submitted and waiting for her work to be assessed. An expert in educational assistive technologies in special schools. We really, really want to share this information and actually deliver hands-on training, hands-on coaching, co-delivery to children to see whether in our very own 12 special schools in Liverpool, we could identify students who so far have not engaged effectively with remote learning and for whom we have kind of almost hit the blank, hit the wall. We don't have many other solutions apart from bring them back to school, which, as we've discussed in today's meeting, is not always possible or preferred. And following from that, see whether the piloting of those chosen strategies for a very, very small proportion of children results in a greater engagement of the learning and therefore greater progress. And I'm looking once again to connect with those of you who previously said, yeah, I'm open to it. You know, any new knowledge is great knowledge, with a renewed promise of sharing something that is a practical toolkit, which I'll show you very quickly just now in its kind of early formation. Can I just double check whether you can see this, please? Can somebody knock? Yeah, thank you. Okay, sorry. Just checking because sometimes I share some completely unrelated puppies or other such. So we've got at the moment a live and ever-changing Send Remote Education Toolkit, which we've started putting together. And I've included in that toolkit at the moment a lot of the information that I'm summarizing here in terms of kind of global perspective and review of literature. But sorry, let me just move back one. But also very, very importantly, practical activities. So global perspective, report from practice in terms of the findings in much more detail. And then section C, which is practical activities that we would like to then develop into example of session structure for all ages and all abilities of our 12 special schools in Liverpool. That toolkit is something that at the moment looks like a PDF document, and I can share it with you so that you can have a look through it and make an informed decision as to whether, based on that, you would like to take advantage of, you know, piggybacking on this project, identifying as many students or as few students in your school which who have not engaged successfully in remote learning, or for whom you haven't yet put any remote learning offer because you didn't think it was possible to necessarily succeed with remote teaching with certain types of students in terms of their needs, and then work really through how to make it work with hands-on support from our school, with the view of evaluating the impact of that between returning after February half-term break and Easter. So it's a short snapshot of let's try something that others said has worked for them, where we haven't tried it before. So at least one new activity for at least one child that has not engaged effectively, and then evaluate it as a very, very simple case study of engagement, communication and interaction benefits of it, and then capture that as part of the toolkit kind of, you know, case study, both for you of working with innovative evidence-based work, for me in terms of this project, which of course serves you know, a certain purpose, but very importantly also with mainstream schools who over time need to have better strategies that we have tested and which we can say they really do work. So I hope that that makes sense. So basically what I'm asking for is those of you who previously said, yeah, I'm up for trying something. We've now looked at what really works, what really doesn't work much to engage students. So we've got an evidence-based approach to saying, okay, out of those things that are most effective at engaging children, I can think of at least one child in my school for whom I've got nothing to lose by trying at least one different strategy for a limited period of time between when we come back on whenever it is, 22nd of February and Easter, which is the 26th of March. If it improves, great. If it improves, you've lost nothing, because actually even the workload that is associated with it we can help with. So what I'm looking for, I guess, is volunteers for who wants to do some piece of work on that, and innovatively, of course, benefit from having this whole toolkit, just because you are helping me construct something, and you can then play with it, and having access to its continuous online updates that we will be generating over the coming months. And who would like to kind of work on that project to have some evidence as well of having tried to go out of your way, obviously, to help children that otherwise we would be perhaps giving up on. So over to you, unmute yourself, ask any questions or other.
I'm happy to, for my deputy, I'm delegating here, to be involved in that, because she's the one that runs our home learning at the minute. Yep. I think for us, it's about trying to engage our very sensory pupils, so our pre-formal learners, very hands-on, practical kind of engagement that I know parents really, really struggle with. So for us, I think it'd be really interesting.
Thank you, Alison, and I've put you on the list, and definitely I'll be in contact. To give you an answer, when we were talking to professionals from across the world about remote education for children with special needs, we purposefully actually said we are looking for all abilities, including PMLD, SLD, children with visual and hearing impairment. How can we work with multisensory deprivations, as well as deprivations as we know them in terms of access, to actually try something that is very interactive and appropriate for the individuals and groups of students. So there are some, I know that I flicked through that 50-page toolkit in a way that was maybe unhelpful on the screen, but there are some really, really interesting, very practical activities that can be led, including for students with abilities that you describe, Alison. So definitely brilliant support that we can offer is definitely through the expertise we've got in assistive technologies as well that can be used remotely.
One of the things we've been looking at, Ania, is although we make an appointment, a time for a family to zoom in with us so that we can work with their young person, often their young person's not ready at that moment. So we've been delivering sessions to the parents who can then deliver whenever their young person's ready during the day. So we've had to go down that route, otherwise they'd just say, oh, they're not ready, that they don't want to do it. But more training for the parents, I suppose, so they can deliver the session.
Okay, so would you be interested, Michelle, in taking part if we focus on that? Yeah. Thank you.
We'd be interested, Ania.
Brilliant. Okay.
Yeah, it's good.
Me too, definitely.
Oh, thank you. So I've got Princess as well. Good. Anybody else who is up for it?
I think I'd be interested in being part of the conversation at this point. We're really struggling with engagement from a lot of our children. They are working on work packs and such like out of choice rather than virtually. And one of the problems that we're finding with our autistic children is when I'm in school, I do schoolwork. When I'm at home, I don't do schoolwork because I'm not at home. Yeah. So I'd like to be part of the conversation if that's possible going forwards. Yeah. So yeah, just tentatively count me in, please.
So why don't we then, why don't you think about at least one of such students of yours who falls into that kind of rigid mindset category, and we can then focus just on that child, one step at a time. Sometimes it's better than trying to kind of, master the universe. So if we can pilot it on, with one child that is very rigid and where the engagement was pretty much a no-go because of that, I think we could have a very personalized conversation about that.
I think I'd like to share, if you permit, I'd like to share your video with my senior leadership team as well, because similar to Alison, I'll be delegating that one.
Yeah, of course, naturally, as do I with vast majority of things. And Jane, you were one of the people who previously said, "Yep, I'm up for piloting anything." How did it go?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, we've got a number of platforms that we use as well. So anything that we can give back that will help, because things like Sam Learning for us is actually really, really bespoke for our students, and we really tailor the work that they're doing within Sam Learning, which is for some of our kids just boom, you know, they're doing hours and hours of SAM learning. I had one last week, he did 9.5 hours of SAM learning. He's just completely obsessed with it.
Yeah, almost excessive.
But for some of our other kids, it's actually just getting them to just engage with that a little bit. So, you know, we find the different platforms work for different children.
That's right.
And we have some children that for one reason or another, we cannot do anything online with them. There is one particular young man who isn't allowed any piece of equipment because he had 60 pieces of equipment removed from his house by the police. So, you know, it's what we do with those kind of kids, and we can drop work packs off and stuff. But if there's anything else that you could possibly think of, help.
Okay, thank you. That's really, really brilliant. And interestingly, you know, we have got also very similar cases of kind of ex-sex offenders and other where the access to technology has been restricted by law. And how do we negotiate that line of can be on site, has the right to education, what's the remote learning? And sometimes in those situations, yes, worksheets, like I said, it's more nuanced than just don't do it or do more of this. You know, it doesn't mean binary 0, 1, black, white. It's about
I have one in particular who is currently housed in a hotel with 2 members of staff and was accessing his remote learning yesterday completely inappropriately and saying what he was going to do to the 2 members of staff who were there, who obviously weren't watching him at all. And so it sort of spiraled into conversations with social workers and all sorts. Anything that will help with that. Definitely.
Thank you very much for that. I know that Ian was on the screen, but he's gone, so perhaps I'll follow it up with him separately. But Jane, I also wanted to reach out to you, if I may, considering that you work with, you know, with all schools, including primary, secondaries, and specials. And part of the idea here is to use this project and the case studies arising from the, you know, as many special schools as we can. So primary, secondary, all needs. And come up with something that could be useful for primary mainstream schools and primary secondary schools, all of whom, of course, have got children with high needs, including autism, including other communication and interaction difficulties, to also pilot something, let's say between Easter and the end of this academic year, in order to then have a wider repertoire of skills that we can develop in the locality for working with children who, for whatever reason, are not in school on site. Do you think that this has legs in terms of the wider Liverpool City Council kind of approach?
Yes, I do. In terms of we did a remote learning questionnaire, and the key cohort that came out, and that every kind of school and subject leader were struggling with was the engagement or adapting the resources or getting access for the SEN, and they wanted more on that. I mean, we've put on some follow-up training as a result of it, but I do think that for subject leaders and school leaders, it would help to have kind of a toolkit and also some case study examples of, you know, like Mark said, this child had a really fixed mindset of, I don't work at home, I only work at school, and this is what we did, and as a result his engagement went up 6% or 10% or whatever. I think that would really help engage the mainstream schools to then try, particularly if it's one child, because that's manageable, and if it's one child that maybe has got some of the traits that some of your children in terms of needs, you've already tried it and found different approaches that work better than others, I think it will be, definitely.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you very much for that. I really appreciate it. Ian has gone, and obviously others needed to drop off the call as well. So what I'm going to do, if that's okay, is I'm going to send an email out after this session, just reiterating the expectations in terms of that project, that pilot, so that people are very clear when you're approaching people to whom you will be delegating that. So it's very, very clear. And it really should be a very, very small time commitment. Considering that we want to start that straight after February half term, I will therefore also link up whoever you name as your lead person for this project with my school, so that we can have a direct conversation about the support that needs to be put in place beforehand, if that's okay. So the only thing that I ask for is, if you can think of at least one child that you would use as a case study, and have a think about what you've tried or what the limitations are in terms of engagement, then we can be really smart about the focus. Okay. Ian, you've left the meeting. So just a quick question. Are you in? Are you out? You're in and out all the time, but you're not speaking because you're muted.
Yeah, I don't know. I haven't got a clue where I'm coming and going, actually.
Okay, no problem at all. Would it help if I caught up with you outside of the meeting at some point?
From what Mark said, I'm very, very similar to him. We've got kids who are accessing it, some are not. Some teachers are brilliant at it, some people are not. So it's really hit and miss. You know, we've got kids who don't want to come into school, for example, and you know, we have difficulties within school, never mind out of school. It's very similar to Mark, really.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'll help out with whatever I can.
Okay, brilliant. If you're keen, and of course, you know, it's like I said, you're helping me with my project, but actually I'm keen to help genuinely with the issue that we've got. And something that colleagues need to be aware of, apart from the fact that obviously, you know, this recording is going to be shared with Ambition Institute, which is the body that does the training. But also on the 26th of March, which is the last day of term before Easter, I've been invited to speak to the National Ofsted research team, because they do a lot of research, of course, about remote learning and whatever other. And on the back of Andrew Cook's invitation, I will be sharing the findings of that. So it's also a nice thing, I guess, for schools to recognize that they will be named as participants in this research, because I think it's something that really can be only a good thing in terms of showing our open mindset to all of the things we do. So brilliant. Well, I've got there for everybody who was on the call keen to get engaged. Thank you very much for that. I'll send you the info and I'll stop the recording now unless there are any other questions. No?